Now, I've had my Mazda MX-5 here for a few years now, and suffice to say I've called it a time attack car, but realistically all I ever do is track day sprints type of thing, me against the clock, just having some fun. It's just a toy. That said, for the first time ever, I've finally entered an actual time attack event. Yes, it's finally happened. I've actually gone and entered a proper time attack event with my time attack car. I've entered Oz Time Attack 2023 at Winton Raceway, and there's a lot of competition that I am going to get smashed by. There's built Evos with 800 horsepower, there's R32 Skylines with a bajillion engine under the bonnet, there's cars with full carbon front ends and massive rear wings and all of these sorts of things, and I'm going to turn up with my measly 300 horsepower Mazda and a plywood splitter. But nonetheless, hey, who knows, maybe I'll end up in the top 5. I'm entered in open class, which is kind of the more competitive, higher performance class. I think, well, actually probably not more competitive. The most competitive class is probably Club Sprint, because you can get some seriously fast cars in that class, and somehow they fit in with the rules. That said, open class is so open in many ways. For example, I could put a twin turbo Ferrari V8 engine in the bonnet of this car and it would be legal, but my wing is not. Yes, believe it or not, this wing is technically not legal within the rules because they require the wing to be within 100 mil of the rearmost point of the car, which means that the wing's hanging too far back. That's because I used to run the wing mounts through the sort of swan neck style over the top here. Now, I've had to temporarily fashion up some new mounts that mount from underneath, and I've done that because the swan neck shifted the wing back so much further. Having it mounted directly underneath basically brings the wing far more forward, and so from a top-down view, it's well within the 100 mil gap that you need from the rear bumper. So we're all safe and legal, which is excellent. The top mounts here, I'm just going to leave them because they're all kind of glued in place. I'll change the car back to the swan neck style mount once this event is over, but at least I know that that is possible and it's done. It wasn't too difficult to do, just some sort of adapter brackets here and a bit of aluminium angle and some bolts, and it's a little bit rudimentary, but it's functional. While I was here, I redid the rear wire stays, added little baby-sized turnbuckles, sort of DIY style. They're not full spec turnbuckles because there's only a single thread on them. So you do have to undo it to tension it, but at least I have the ability to tension them rather than having sort of a fixed length, which is handy. I had to trim out this section here to make these new wires fit because they do mount further in than the old one, so this needed a bit of extra cutting. There was already a notch here from this kind of rear ducktail section, but it's just some aluminium core flute stuff, alu board or Alcubond or whatever it's called, but aluminium sandwich with a cord plastic center. And yes, other than that, a few other things that I've done on the car. I made myself some new door numbers. I brought myself a Cricut or Cricut, I'm not sure. The sort of home user vinyl cutter, the thing that like mums use to make homemade cards and gifts and stuff. Anyway, I bought one of those so I could do my own vinyl cutting. So already it's kind of paid for itself in the number of numbers and things I've had to cut. So that's cool. New design for that. I also replaced the aero catch latches on the bonnet. The old ones I had were kind of worn out, and so when you opened them, they cammed over too far. You couldn't close them again. These ones all work. It was almost a direct replacement. I thought they'd be exactly dimensionally the same, but they're not for whatever reason. So when I put these ones in, the bolts all lined up, but the hole for the catch that's attached to the car was in a different spot. So those needed some adjustment. And inside the car, I've added a few little tweaks and changes here. For the Raspberry Pi dashboard, I've added some capacitors so that they have kind of temporary battery. So if I'm doing things like cranking the car, it doesn't kill the Pi, which is handy as a sort of safety measure. I can have the car shut off, crank it over to start it, and the Pi doesn't die, which is good. I've also replaced the GPS module. I had a Garmin Glow, and I've replaced it with one of these, I can't remember what it's called, Race Pack or something. $200 odd US for that. and I had the Garmin Glow. It just seemed to be always really unreliable and inconsistent with its data. I used to have a Q-Stars before that. That one finally died, but the Q-Stars was generally pretty accurate. The Garmin, terrible. Here's hoping this thing is better. And underneath the car, I got myself a set of Shockworks coilovers, a local brand made in Australia, well, assembled in Australia, made in Korea, I believe, and generally considered relatively capable. I guess we'll see. I spoke to the guys there, took the car to their shop, which is only sort of a half an hour drive from here. I described to them my particular car and the use that it experiences, and told them the spring rates that I was running, and they kind of built the shock and valved it to the spec that they thought was appropriate. So hopefully that all works out well. Did have those coilovers in the car at the Bend event that I was at a few weeks back. Suffice to say, my first time at that track, so I didn't notice a significant difference in the car. It felt softer, I will say that. So we'll see how it goes at Winton, and a track I'm a little bit more familiar with, so maybe I'll have a more significant feel for the car and whether it feels any different and whether or not it drives faster, right? So if I get quicker lap times out of it, then maybe the shocks have done something, which would be great. Suffice to say, I'm not an expert driver, and I do not really notice significant differences in coilovers unless they're, unless you're going from stock to Max Peating rods to Shockworks, then yes, you're going to feel a difference. But when you're going from reasonably good quality to reasonably good quality, I'm not good enough of a driver to discern the difference. I had MCA purple coilovers. They're an older spec coilover from MCA from a few years back. It was their kind of street spec coilover at the time. I bought them probably 2019, maybe earlier. I can't remember exactly. No, it would have been earlier, maybe 2017. So I've had them for quite a few years. It was just time to move on to something different. I wanted to spend a bit more money on a product that was perhaps a bit more specific to the car and what I was doing with it, hence why I went with the MCAs. Hence why I moved on from the MCAs to the Shockworks. Here's hoping that it all works out good. And that's about all I have to report for now. Heading off to Oztime Attack this coming weekend, so I'll get some videos out of that event as soon as I can. It does take me a bit of time to edit them and put them all together, so bear with me, could be a few weeks. I hope you enjoy.